Are you unconvinced about Havertz to Arsenal? Have you just spent a year mocking Chelsea, only to find out we're signing one of their star players? Are you looking for any kind of logic that would make this all make sense? Well, you're in the right place. Kai Havertz to Arsenal. As of recording, it's not done, but very reliable sources are saying that Havertz has agreed personal terms, wants the move, and it's now up to the clubs to find an agreement in terms of the fee as a bid goes in. I have to admit, at first, I too was a bit skeptical, but I've done some thinking, reading and watching, taken a hit of copium, and I hope over the course of this video, I can convince you that it is yet another example of modern coaches like Pep and Arteta teaching us all the game. Of course, you can dismiss everything I'm about to say. You can say Havertz is washed, I don't know ball, all that stuff. If you want to, sure, leave it in the comments, get on with your day. But, and I don't know about you, but I think Mikel Arteta might know more about football than you and me. Maybe. Just a hunch. So maybe Mikel is onto something. Joking aside, it's not to say you can't criticise, it's just that I think the club have earned the right to be trusted with their record in the market. Think back to the concerns about signing Ramsdale, White, even Ødegaard and Martinelli. The talent ID at the club right now is really, really good. So it's our job to try and make sense of it from a fan perspective, even if we have our doubts. On the face of it, it might be seen as a weird move for all the reasons you've seen this week, I'm sure. But it's only weird because, in my view, we're still stuck in certain ways of thinking about squad building and transfers. There's two things we need to talk about before we start to discuss Havertz himself. Areas or patterns of thinking that, in my view, need to evolve in the modern fan's mind. Firstly, I think many fans still think of players in primarily positional terms. He's a 9, he's a winger, etc. While this can be useful as a starting point, as Mikel has said before himself, players' roles are becoming more specific, so labels are becoming more and more redundant. Listen to his answer to this question from TDK's very own George Voutsas here.
How do you see substitutes being used in the future to control games? Will be finishers in the future? Good question. They can be, but I think football is becoming more and more specific, and that means that the role of each player becoming more and more narrow just to fulfill a very specific role.
Instead of asking what position a player is and saying that as the end of it, can we ask some different questions? What if we can evolve our thinking and start simply considering a player's skill set as the primary point of interest? What problems does a team have in or out of possession, and what does this specific profile bring to solve them? If we have that profile in that zone doing that role, how does that affect the ecosystem of the team? Can we build a squad that can deal with all eventualities, adapt to different setups, and is less rigid? Can they fulfill a number of roles, changing around even during a game? Secondly, fans assume, likely unconsciously, that the dynamics of their team from last season will be the exact same again this season. So I think we're trying to fit Havertz into our current perception of the team. Is he the Xhaka? Is he the Jesus? And I wonder if that is helpful. What if we could accept that there is likely to be change to the setup of the team, as we've seen every summer by the way, not only between games, seasons and periods of the season, but even between game states. As an example, there's those who say a midfield three of Havertz, Ødegaard and Rice doesn't work against teams out of possession in our 4-4-2 block. And I have some questions. 1, how do we know we're going to be defending the same way next season? 2, who says we play 38 league games the same way? And 3, we've never seen it. How can we be sure? Minutes are the new currency of football, not starts. You've got Nottingham Forest away on a Sunday, then Leipzig away. Those are two entirely different teams who ask you to deal with different problems, and your squad will always be changing anyway, especially because of injuries, loss of form, suspensions, and so on. He doesn't, and he won't, play every minute. In my view, the idea of the first 11 is dead. If we can move away from first 11s to thinking about squads, consider what problems he solves that we don't have the answers to right now, how he'd allow us to play, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the same every week, and we don't have to fit him into our current way of thinking about the team, we start to get some interesting questions. What could he be? And more importantly, what can we be by adding that profile that we don't have to the squad? Because trust me, the talent is there. If we were making this signing in summer 2020, we'd all be over the moon. So what areas of growth potential do Arsenal have, and how could Havertz specifically try and fix them? Number 1. In my view, we were missing a physically tall forward target to play a slightly different way in certain game states. Number 2, we get help to break down a low block with elite half-space crossing on both sides. Number 3, we also get great final third movement in combination on the left-hand side and right-hand side with top quality reverse passes and invention, something we really only have at the moment from Ødegaard. And number 4, we have squad depth in the front 5 positions. Have a guess who the tallest player in our front central zones, i.e. the centre forward, left 8 and right 8 was last season. According to Transfermarkt, it was Granit Xhaka at 6'1". Now he's leaving, the next tallest is Martin Ødegaard at just over 5 foot and 8 inches. At times last season, I felt Arsenal lacked a different route forward as a different option. City now have this with Haaland, and it just gives them different options as well as their structured build-up, which we saw at the Etihad as they evaded our press. Havertz could provide us a different way of progressing up the pitch, and he has the technique and skill to hold off and link up. At 6'3" or 4, depending on who you believe, he adds a different option in those zones. Height isn't everything, of course, and there's more to being good in the air than just being tall. But for a team who want to dominate physically, as Mikel outlines here, and offer aerial threat from set pieces, which Havertz does, it does help. I've been of the opinion recently that Arsenal eventually need to get themselves a Kane, Haaland, Osimhen striker profile, someone who may be able to provide that more direct route. But those guys don't come around very often, and I don't think there is one available this summer who's not going to be silly money. And I think Arteta wants that profile eventually himself too, as we saw with the Vlahovic, Isaac and Abraham links. But in the meantime, could we find a different solution? In my view, we can. Kai Havertz could drop into centre forward or false 9 for periods in a game to be a target man if we're struggling to build up. He could start at false 9 and rotate deep into wide areas where he operates well, or simply be a target for Ramsdale to hit wherever he plays. Is that what Arteta wants long term? I don't think so, but do I want my tallest central progression option to be 5'8", who by the way normally drops deep anyway, with no option on the bench who can be a target to hit for the centre-backs or goalkeepers in different game states? No. Next, Havertz has a wand of a left foot from the half space. As a weapon to break down low blocks, it could be so beneficial. Think of the goal Jesus scored at Brentford. We want more of that, and that was Xhaka. If we could have the option for half-space crosses on both sides with more regularity and quality, that's only going to help. Despite being left-footed, Havertz doesn't really have an angle bias to his game in the way that Ødegaard does, so he could drop in on the right or left in the half-space and play balls into the box for Jesus' elite movement and separation. It takes the pressure off Ødegaard being the focal point in that regard when we break teams down, and breaking down low blocks is an area where we have growth potential. This could really add to our arsenal of ways of attacking the box. Arsenal. Get it? Next, just watch him. The guy understands space. What do I mean by that? Arriving late in the box, drifting wide, facilitating, he has it all in the final third, apart from the final action in my view. He doesn't have elite ball striking, he isn't a predator, but look at how he links up and finds his teammates. You just need to see him in attacking situations, he often makes the right call. Imagine him in combination with Zinchenko and Martinelli on the left, or even White and Saka on the right. He could be a truly facilitative player, and he would be a monumental upgrade to Xhaka in the final third. You just need to use your eyes to see Xhaka's limitations compared to what Kai might bring. Xhaka was great, but we can do better. We know we can. By the way, if you'd like to see some in-depth analysis of Kai Havertz's game with specific examples of how I believe he could fit into this Arsenal team, you can check out the bonus content to this video on Patreon or on the channel by becoming a member to get that and loads of other benefits, including all the bonus content from previous videos for just £3 a month. And finally, there's the squad depth issue. Granted, any signing gives you depth, but Havertz could play minutes for us in a number of positions, and is another player who means fewer and fewer redundant backup players. We need depth all over the pitch, and Havertz provides it without expecting to start every game in a specific position, I don't think at the moment. That might mean players like Eddie go, which might be for the best. Not to mention the age profile, the pedigree, the international experience, the likelihood he wouldn't want to be a top earner, the league experience and more. It's just a top squad addition. Finally, let's address some concerns. His defensive work rate. I promise you, this guy's a much better defender than you think. Go and watch him in games. Here's his FB ref numbers compared to forwards. I worry about him under contact, but he works hard off the ball in the press, and I think with some coaching and some proper transition controllers behind him, the slight deficiencies in his tackling technique wouldn't matter. He doesn't score enough goals. You're right, he doesn't in this league. His best ever season for Chelsea, he scored 8. But that's not what he'd be here to do, in my opinion. His link-up play and work between the lines is genuinely elite. However, he does have the record for most goals scored in a Bundesliga campaign by a teenager, with 17 for Bayer Leverkusen. And you know where he scored those goals from? Midfield. But I hear the questions. Where could he actually be played? It's all very well saying it's a squad game, we need to talk about minutes, not starts, but there is a reality. We need a plan. What's the plan? Well, that's the point. I don't know, and you don't know. There's a handful of people who knows, and I highly doubt they're watching, Unless you are Arteta, in which case, like and subscribe, and also give me a job. But that should be exciting, not scary. Could he be our De Bruyne, the second striker playing in behind Haaland? Does that then point towards this mythical all-action number 9 Arteta supposedly wanted before arriving soon, who Havertz can bounce off? Is that 9 signing in 2024, or perhaps even later this window? Could he be the tip of a midfield diamond? Could he play at false 9? Could he be a floating wide option? Could he be in a 2? Could he be a left 8? Would we defend differently? So many questions, but for me it makes me excited to see what they do, rather than fearful of how it might go wrong. His profile, skills and capacity give him strengths and weaknesses that give us options in all of those roles. As I say, I do worry about him under contact. He is a bit languid, but players improve, and more I'm beginning to believe environment is key for players. Really talented players can look terrible in the wrong system. I'm not saying Kai Havertz is the perfect player. I'm not saying he was my first thought ahead of the summer. But the idea that this guy is finished, washed, terrible player, I'm just not having one bit. There's a really exciting talent there that we've seen flashes of, and in the right environment and system, we could have a star for a reasonable price. Mikel has a knack of taking players who are highly rated at a young age and developing their game. We've seen it with Ødegaard and Saka, and we know about his work with Sterling. I'm sure he could do something similar with Havertz. Let's see what happens. Right, I'm off to touch some grass.